Welcome back to B2B Brew, powered by Oracle. I'm your host, Joe Escobedo. And with me, we have two very, very special guests. First off, we have Umesh Krishna, who is a director of marketing at Swiggy, as well as Ratnesh Mehra, who's a experience strategy and transformation leader, India at Oracle. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the show today. So, Umesh, I'd like to kick it off with you. I'd like to find out what's been going on in your world 2020, 21. What are some of the challenges you face? What are the challenges you anticipate for the remainder of the year?
Definitely two challenging years and a little bit of deja vu coming back in the sense that we were in a similar phase in 2020 as well. And we see that repeating over and out again. So we are a business who is very close to consumer lives, purely B2C and in the essential services in a way. I think in our business, we feel that impact on an hourly, week, monthly, we operate. All of that is, she gets affected. Whatever happens in the market, it immediately reflects in our operations, consumer demand, the way people look at the category, the use cases that they have. So we have always, it has always placed very heavy demands on us in terms of us being very, and we have to always anticipate what the consumers are up to. Think of the probable anxieties that they might be fighting, solve for their problems in advance. And very often delivering customer experience is also a tougher task in these challenging times. But I think what we always try to do is twice as harder to keep up on that front.
Absolutely. And you're in a very interesting space. As you mentioned, you are in essential services, unlike a lot of industries. And obviously, that has had a big impact on what you guys do, demand on a regular basis. Ratnesh, I'd love to hear from your side. What are some of the challenges that your clients have been having 2020, 2021, and what do you anticipate they're going to be challenged with for the remainder of the year?
Yeah, I think the kind of situation we are in, and with this pandemic at its peak, this being a second wave, I think 2020, when it hit organizations in this country, I believe a lot of myths got busted, primarily for the fact I think nobody had prepared for this kind of a scenario, right? So it was business as usual, organizations in different levels of maturity. Swiggy is, I believe, always been in a very high on the maturity curve on digital transformations and customer experience. Also, primarily, they were very front ending, but there were a lot of customers who primarily didn't know what to do. There was absolute disruption of the services, whatever levels of maybe digital way of doing things just fell flat. So initially, there was a lot of ad hoc work which was done. India is known for what we call as the word jugaad, which is basically getting it corrected and learning it on the way and improvising. But a lot of organizations did that. But what happened was it put up a kind of a mirror in front of these organizations, and they said, "Hey, what do we need to do if this hits us next?" And we got a lot of customers who basically went back on the drawing board and said, "How do we ensure that this kind of a disruptions does not happen next?" We'll be seeing some of those things in terms of processes and systems which got built, or those plans being executed. So this time, while we are having a much worse pandemic right now as we're facing, but we are seeing a better supply chain. We're seeing the organizations are not panicking. They have already put in a thought process around how do we handle. So the scarcity is not on towards the supply of things. There were times the whole businesses were disrupted. We don't see a situation as grave as last year because organizations started embarking on how do we counter this. I would say digital transformation, digitization, digital channels, that kind of big takeoff. And in India, we worked with a lot of organizations who probably had just a lip service kind of an action, but therefore now very truly invested into and understand how digital transformation is going to help them. And that's just the way of the future.
Absolutely. Ratnesh, you bring up some very good points in terms of no one was really prepared for COVID. I think none of us in our lifetime had really experienced anything like this. So a lot of business leaders were definitely caught off guard. And unfortunately, a lot of markets are still dealing with the pandemic. They're still hit quite difficultly. But I think it goes back to your point of how we prepare post COVID. How do we start building things? We're dealing with it now. Hopefully, we build some of those processes, technology, things are a little bit better. But what are some advice? I'll hand it over to Umesh first on what are some things that marketers could start doing to plan post COVID?
Very difficult question to address, and I am not sure if I have all the points in place to cover, but I'll give this a shot. And a lot of that is it's more of self-reflection in terms of looking at what we did over the past 15 odd months, and of that, what worked out well, and what are some of the learnings that we carried forward. So one thing that is very key in such scenarios is to understand the fact that a lot of your segmentation practices or cohorting practices in terms of clustering your consumers into various behaviors may not apply. So those logic may not apply anymore in terms of consumer behavior. People change a lot when something like a pandemic sets in. And therefore we have to rediscover and our strategy very quickly. You have to rework and look at how people are behaving, what are the new patterns that are emerging. And based on this, how quickly are you able to change around your communication? Quickly are you change around your priority of your marketing budgets for various segments? I think that is very key. And sometimes it's very hard to move away from the current ways of working. We may already have certain assumptions on certain audience segments that we have built over years. Sometimes we may have to park them and look at all the patterns as quickly as possible. So I think and it's also not one of those scenarios where you could go out in the market, do a lot of consumer research and get extremely detailed quantitative or qualitative feedback. Therefore, data analytics and digital analytics becomes very important. Putting your analyst to the task, having the right software that gives you the right data, the right visualization, and understanding those patterns is, I think, the first element. Second is that what do we communicate? How do we put out something to the consumers at this point of time? Few factors therein is one, how important is your or how what is the role that your category or your product plays in the current context. Now, the most interesting part about marketing in these times is that you're in a 1 or 2 week window, the role that your brand is playing in consumer lives could change drastically. You might be an essential at one point of time. You might be just a luxury at some point of time. You might become an essential later. Understanding the role that you would want to play and how truly can your brand deliver to that role is also critical. And given that you are ready for each of those roles that you want to play, then obviously there's the work of building the marketing communication around it. And there also we have to think through a lot of cultural and social sensitive elements while designing the marketing communication. Something that we put a lot of effort in last time around because marketing communications are generally jovial, it's happy. And sometimes that tonality may not cut too well through the consumer. So we may have to re-articulate what we say or how we say it or where we say it. And that collectively delivers.
Absolutely. You bring up some very good points. And I know it was a very tough questions, and I think you did a great job of answering it. You bring up some good points in terms of identifying some of those emerging patterns and able to plan better. And Ranish and I were actually talking about this on a different episode, leveraging uh, digital to identify some of these signals and patterns. So, Ranish, I'd love to hear what are some advice for some of your clients during this time.
So I think different strategies. See, in some of the customers where it's more of a B2B kind of a thing, even in B2C, I think one of the things organizations have realized is new acquisitions is difficult. So growing wallet out of an existing customer is the best way to forward, getting engaged with the existing customer, getting more business out of that in terms of different products and services, or expanding what you're already doing or engage with them. A lot of analytics in now, going back and looking at the customer segments, which customer segments are the best to approach, best in terms of your profitable, best who align best in terms of your products and in your brand, who are more profitable customers, loyal customers, right? And then you tend to focus your attention to these segments which are coming out. Net new acquisition, I believe one of the things which we are seeing in terms of again data is how fast are you reacting to the data? And I'm sure Vish and Swiggy, I think that's the mantra, right? How fast you can react to a customer engagement or a bad customer experience, or good customer experience is great anyway. And how do you make sure that customer stays with you, or an experience does not snowballs into a bad incident or a bad advocacy going all the way out? It's also in some of the businesses, it's a matter of that purchase happening or not purchasing. Some of the reactions of the organization base is now real time. Just is as much as the data to be processed, data to be looked is almost like on a real time basis. Again, as I said, Swiggy is a great example. Cab aggregators or somebody who's basically on the moment of those purchases, those are not great purchases. It has to be there. So we're seeing in that category a lot of work being done. Obviously, a lot of automation, a lot of intelligence, human and logics can work there. So there's a lot of automation, a lot of intelligence being built in that side.
Absolutely. You bring up some very good points in terms of growing your existing customer base. It's far easier to sell within that and grow that. And another good point you bring up is focusing on your most profitable consumer segments, because not all consumers are equal. So you'll have some consumers, obviously, customers that are more profitable, and you should be focusing on that. I think it goes back to a previous episode where we talked about activities versus productivity, and make sure that we're doing less activities and actually driving more productivity, more revenue and sales by focusing on specific these target segments that are going to be more profitable in the long term. So very good point. Umesh, I'd love to get your thoughts on, you mentioned data analytics, and obviously Swiggy is a very tech savvy organization. I'd love to hear, what is a tool or channel that you think people aren't fully leveraging yet?
Okay. One thing we do spend a lot of time on our analytics, but we always feel that, hey, we could do a lot more. And especially when we are young, we look at our, whether it's looking at our tech stack or whether we look at the way we understand and define our consumer segments and cohorts. In all of that, we always think that, hey, there's a lot more scope to improve, and we look forward to a lot of things. And when I look at this plethora of things we could do, I think there are a lot of things that we are trying to prioritize and go after these days. And it's a tough decision for us too. I think the first aspect that we need to think harder is about having the right second party data partnerships in place, and working with sourcing the right third party data as and when necessary. Because sometimes what from your first party audience, or from all the first party data that you have, could just be a subset of consumers' behavior. It could just be a subset of his behavior or his persona with your brand, or it could just be a subset of his behavior within the category. It doesn't give you a holistic point of view of the consumer. Therefore, I think leveraging second and third party data in all your marketing practices, whether it is branding, remarketing, I think can add a lot of value. And I work with a lot of younger startups also in our portfolio companies. And that is one aspect where a lot of people are probably aspiring to, but I still feel that generally we could all do better.
Absolutely. It's a very good point. And like I said, I'm glad we have Ratnesh on in today's session, because I'd love to hear, Ratnesh, from your point of view, what are some ways in which you are advising clients on how to get the most out of their analytics? Umesh talked about leveraging second and third party data, but what is some advice you generally give to your clients?
Yeah, you which basically just exactly said which I had on my top of the mind. The first is the data enrichment. First party data is no longer sufficient. It can just give you a certain set of in terms of transactions or order bookings or some demographic profile. You need to connect it to your second party and third party data, get as many behavioral insights onto the customer. And the trick is keep it real time, because it just keeps changing. My classic example, uh, I was more of an outdoor guy in terms of exercises and all that. Last 1 year, I've basically converted more towards the yoga side of things and all that, right? So somebody tracking me or now trying to sell me an outdoor and all that versus what I have done. And that has also, the yoga has led to series of cascading changes in terms of behavior, in terms of what now I'm more focused on organic. Don't go me wrong there. Yeah, but at the time very early, but that's what I'm turning into. And that was, of course, because we were locked down for 1 odd year. And now I'm on to that path. But coming back, I think the real time behavioral insight of this whole data or data lakes, customer data platform, whatever you call it, I think that's very critical. Organizations are still trying to figure out how do they do it best. And this is an endless world, right? So more the data, more it's merrier. And organizations are trying to build this platform. Some people are doing it in house. Some people are using larger organizations and their assets to do it. So we've seen it both ways. The other thing which I'm seeing is again the efficiency of when you get the data, what do you do about it? How fast are you reacting to it? How fast are you able to orchestrate an action or an insight out of it? I think also seeing organizations, they have a lot of data, but they don't know what to do about it. Their execution engines probably are not as seamlessly connected to the insight engines. So from the data to insight to action is probably, I believe there is a lot of work which organizations, again, there are organizations who are right on the top of maturity curves and they are doing that very quickly. But again, I believe in coming years with very strong AI ML coming in, this whole thing will start getting more connected better. And we would see this engine end to end working more efficiently. I think that this is the next area where I would see a lot of work going to happen.
Absolutely. Very good point. I highly recommend any marketers watching, listening, check out the maturity model that Oracle has developed. It's very interesting. But Umesh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on a lot of people who follow you online on social, all your friends, they want to know what are you up to? And I'd love to hear what's something that you or your team have done recently that you're really proud of.
So some wonderful examples I'm struggling to contextualize. But one thing that I think was one piece of work that we done last year, which probably is very relevant to today's days, is how do we assert and bring back the trust in the category? In for food delivery, for example, when the pandemic set in, there were a lot of concerns in the market in terms of is food delivery safe? And obviously there was WHO and multiple authorities speaking about this and saying that, hey, it's absolutely safe, but fear is fear. And in that time, I would say it was more of paranoia than fear. So what we did was in the IPL of 2020, we launched a campaign which socially validated the concept of online ordering. We spoke about how, hey guys, more than a crore people have ordered since lockdown and still we do not have, and all of these orders have been safely delivered, right? So bringing in social validation, trying to emphasize on a fact, but a fact that is that can be easily understood by the general public. So we had that campaign around IPL 2020 and it worked wonders for us. It really helped us get a lot of business back, reactivate a lot of consumer segments. And then of course, more targeted actionables were taken at cohort level, but eventually helped us win a lot of business back. So that is one that Deesh was also talking about, the importance of third party data. That was one of those contexts where we use that a lot in our campaigning. None of the segments were purely first party segments. Very often we enriched it, enhanced it with all the info we could get so that we could predict the right cohort for the right marketing action and the right communication. Yeah. So this is one work when I look at it, I think we executed really well in the last 1 year.
It's very interesting because a lot of times we think of social proof or social validation as a way to increase or to influence the sales process, but you actually use it in a way where a lot of people were apprehensive on online, food delivery at the time. Maybe they were wondering if it's safe or not. So leveraging those stats, those points in order to validate or ease some of that apprehension is quite an interesting approach that I hadn't heard about when it comes to leveraging social proof and social validation. So thank you so much for sharing that, Umesh. Ratnesh, same question to you. I'd love to hear what are something that you're working on currently with clients that you're really proud of?
I think there are a couple of examples. This is this one brand, Indian clothes, primarily in clothes, very known for very ethnic. They revived the ethnic Indian brand, Indian clothing segments. They had a complete disruption during the COVID. We worked very closely. This brand is known globally for what it brings an Indian ethnicity onto forum. And let me be very honest, when they launched an e-commerce was primarily to cater to non-resident Indians settled in US, Europe, Australia, and who can buy it. But the way over a year this organization transformed their e-commerce channel and started connecting their stores. They actually imbibed the entire digital culture on how can we manage this whole lockdown and disruption, and nobody can visit our stores now. And believe me, clothes and ethnic is a very look and feel wear category. It's not a shirt size 16 and a half white and you buy it online. They still were able to, with all the technologies, we're working with them, able to actually imbibe this. And I cannot reveal the numbers, but they're doing fantastic turnaround, and their e-commerce sales are a very good percentage of their total sales. And by the way, this organization works a lot with artisans at the ground level, at lost arts designs, right at the bottom level with villages and all that. So we're very proud that we work with this organization. But the way these guys, they have transformed there, and they're just not ending there. Now they're bringing their business and dealers together onto the same platform. So that journey, which got probably kicked off by some reason because of this pandemic, and it was probably just a face off to sell it to some NRIs. I think the organization, they have actually transformed into a real e-commerce kind of platform. So very proud of that. The other one, we hear a lot about how can these connected devices, and we are all smart devices. But this is another speaker company. And what do you do with that insight is more important. And that's why I just wanted to bring it out. So what these guys did was they had all these speakers which work actually in your showers, right? This is a speaker which can work in your shower, and it is a pretty expensive one. Now, what these guys started reading the data, they realized that the of this speaker, which was supposed to be, let's say, 5 years, because of certain parameters, they started getting the messages. They realized that it will probably go up in 2.5 years. So believe me, nothing wrong with the speaker, everything working fine. But this organization realized that what we committed to the customer is not going to happen. In 2.5 years time, we're going to have a problem. And by the way, it would have gone out of warranty, so nothing bad. But what this guy was, they went back to engineering. They actually improvised, tested it, and then to all the customers, one fine day, at each of their homes, what they received is a brand new replacement speaker, and said, "This is what we believe is something which is last as per our quality commitment to you." So turning and IoT and smart devices and that data into a customer experience is something which this company did. And I'm very proud to have that, an organization who thought customer centricity is the most critical form. Forget what we're going to do. And they could have just wrapped it, not done it, but they went ahead and did it. And I can tell you they have customers for life now.
I can imagine. I would definitely buy from them. I think my kids would love that as well. But I think it's back to what you're saying. A lot of times as marketers, we talk about putting customers first. How often do we actually do it? But I think it's a beautiful example of a brand that has, actually done that, put it in practice. And I agree with you. I'm sure the customers absolutely love them. The final question for today is, Umesh, I know you're on the speaking circuit. You well, very well connected in the marketing space. But I'd love to find out if you could ask 100 of your marketing leader peers one question, what would it be?
Okay. So one question in the sense that do you want me to, is it just for the knowledge's sake, or is it just for giving them a direction through a question?
Maybe not knowledge. Yeah. For knowledge purposes, what question would you ask 100 marketing leaders in your space?
Sure. I'm very keen to see how they bring on board new freshers into the team, because I think, it's super interesting to work with anyone who's graduated, let's say, after 2017, 2018, because they've read a different version of Kotlin just to start off. And obviously they have come with their digital natives, unlike many of us who graduated much earlier. So I would like to see what are criteria that is set to bring them on. And what I've noticed is that even some of the other senior leaders struggle to understand some of this talent, because they're going to speak a very different language than you in interviews. And I've often seen that disconnect happen. And you are bringing a digital native into the environment, and then you would already have a digital environment set within your company. So you will have certain practices set, and which you believe are right. But when these juniors come in, they could ask you very basic questions that make you feel like, hey, you've done it all wrong. So I'm very keen to understand how these folks are onboarded into marketing analytics teams and groomed over a period such that you can get the best out of them. So that is one aspect I could think of quickly.
That's it's a very interesting point of view. As someone who teaches master students, I think that's one thing that we're constantly trying to do is bridge the gap. How do we make sure that these fresh graduates are ready to start immediately as possible? And on the flip side, as an organization, how do you bring them into the organization to make sure that you're fully leveraging their experience? Because you're absolutely right. I work with a lot of very young, talented marketers, and I'm blown away by how many things they know that I don't know. So I think really good advice that I think are a good question that I would love to hear as well too. What are some of the leaders doing when it comes to bringing fresh graduates into the organization? So thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate you sharing your insights with us today. And to everyone watching, please feel free to share this episode with all of your peers. A lot of really good insights in there. Most importantly, everyone, stay safe, take care, and we will see you soon in the next episode of B2B Brew. Thanks, everyone.